Expression of awareness. I would like to explain in more detail two important principles: essence and expression, Nongwo and Tsal. The relationship between these two is like the relationship between the sun and the sunlight. You cannot have the sunlight without the sun shining. It's the same with the expression of mind essence and the essence itself. The essence doesn't increase or decrease, is neither improved or worsened. Whether it is recognized or not recognized, in the essence itself, there is no difference whatsoever. The only possibility of recognition lies in the expression. The expression of this essence can either know itself or not know itself. That is the whole importance of knowledge. In Sanskrit, prajna. In Tibetan, sherab. It is said that when the expression dawns as sherab, as knowledge, when the expression knows its own nature, it is liberated, there is freedom. When the expression moves as thought, as thinking, it is bewildered. There is delusion. In this distinction lies the whole difference. In other words, whether the expression is liberated as knowledge or confused as thinking is determined by the practitioner knowing or not knowing his own nature. In the essence itself, there is no difference. It's not improved by recognizing or made worse by not recognizing. When the expression moves as knowledge, it is liberated. When the expression moves as thought, it is deluded. This is what makes the whole difference. To be a normal sentient being is to never recognize the nature of this expression. It is like an idiot who never sees the sun shining in the sky and who thinks that the sun is the light that illuminates everything. This expression is your own expression. It doesn't come from any body other than yourself, just as the light of the sun doesn't come from any other place than the sun itself. The ability to distinguish between essence and expression marks the difference between Buddhas and sentient beings. It is like one identity with two aspects. The identity itself, the essence, is like the original sun that is naturally radiant and unmade. The expression, your own expression which you don't recognize, then takes the form of perceiver and perceived. The perceived is seen as external while the perceiver is here. When the essence in the expression is not recognized, the expression takes the form of thinking. The recognition of mind essence is like an intelligent person who understands. There must be a source for this sunlight that shines everywhere. When a master points out your true nature, he is saying the equivalent of, all this light is the expression of the sun. Now look up into the sky. Do you see that there is one sun that shines over the whole world? And the intelligent person replies, yes, that is the sun itself, and its expression is the light everywhere. That is how one should understand. What is the point of knowledge? When recognizing the essence of the expression of thought, the expression immediately dawns as knowledge. It is like seeing the sun itself. If not, we don't notice where the expression comes from, and we end up looking for everywhere for the sun. That is called the expression moves as thoughts, underquotes, how it becomes thought patterns. The expression gets caught up in the thoughts of the five perceived objects of the senses: visible forms, audible sounds, tastes, smells, and textures. Thoughts move after mental objects like pleasures and pain as well. An intelligent person can figure out that there is actually a real sun shining. Longchenpa's Dharmadhatu Kosha says, the original essence is like the radiant sun, naturally luminous and primordially unformed. Sentient beings do not recognize the nature of their expression and get caught up in it. The two stages are described as the primary and secondary expressions. Primary expression is simply the lack of knowledge what the essence is. That takes the form of the five poisons, which is the secondary expression. The five poisons can turn into the 8 innate thought states, or even more, the 84,000 disturbing emotions. This is the creation of samsara. However, when the expression dawns as knowledge, it is like an intelligent person thinking, there must be a sun itself. Where is it? He looks toward the sun and realizes, there it is. It is like seeing the sun itself. Immediately, the sun essence is seen as unconfined empty cognizance. Usually, we regard mind as being either empty or conscious. Please understand that mind essence is an unconfined empty cognizance. The empty aspect is the Dharmakaya, cognizance is Sambhogakaya, and the unconfined quality is Nirmanakaya. Recognizing this in actuality is like being face to face with the three kayas as one, the essence body, Sovavikaya. Isn't that moment empty of perceiver and perceived? In the Mahamudra system, this is exactly what is meant by one taste, not two tastes. You never hear two tastes. Two tastes means subject and object are held in mind. One taste means nothing is held. There is no act of fixating. When there is no fixation, it is impossible to have two tastes. It is only one taste. This oneness is objectless, traceless. If some kind of oneness is still believed to be, it is only a fixation. We may pretend that we have let go of dualistic fixation, but we still believe in the concept of a state of non-duality. In order to be truly objectless, that should be let go of. Rinpoche, are you recognizing mind essence? Student, it's difficult. It's very short. Rinpoche, what's the trouble you're experiencing? What is the difficulty exactly? If it's very short, what is the problem in repeating it many times? Is this short moment something you create by meditating? Student, no. Rinpoche, then it's not really difficult, is it? If you want the moment to last a long time and you want to immediately become an arhat, then you can say it is very difficult. From beginningless lifetimes until now, we have been deluded. To accomplish great achievements in the span of 5 or 6 years is difficult because we have such a deeply ingrown habit of fixation and delusion. Now we need to attain a new habit, not by meditating on an it, but by growing accustomed to this recognition. If you had not strayed into this bad habitual pattern to begin with, it would be easy. If you were already an enlightened bodhisattva, if the natural stability of the essence had not slipped away, you would be unconfined empty cognizance suffused with knowing. But that is what all sentient beings have lost. It's not quite right to say that it's lost. Rather, it slipped out of sight by being preoccupied, by the power of our minds being caught up in thought. That is our deeply ingrown habit. Since beginningless time, the essence body, the awakened state of the indivisible three kayas, has always been unceasing. It was never cut off, never lost. Because mind fools itself, it creates this negative habit and fails to actualize the innate stability of its essence. Right now, this recognition of mind essence is like a small infant, whereas the deluded thinking is like a strong person, a grown-up who takes this infant on its back and runs around everywhere. The small infant appears to be powerless. Our Rigpa right now is like an infant Rigpa. It is born, but it's not developed. The powerful grown-up running around is dualistic thinking, the expression we are caught up in right now. The infant Rigpa is carried off by the grown-up trickster who runs around and does all kinds of scams day and night. Student, how does the expression arise as the development stage? Rinpoche, for development stage to arise as the expression of Rigpa is, of course, only possible after one has fully recognized Rigpa. This approach of Rigpa's expression is like allowing images to appear unobstructedly in a clear mirror. Before that, development stage is a training in creating white thoughts, not samsaric thoughts, which are black thoughts, but devotion, compassion, pure perception, and so forth. As long as your expression moves as thinking, which is delusion, this deluded thinking can be either black or white. If you are caught up in black thoughts, you are caught up in these three poisons. Whatever comes out of that is black, like the 84,000 types of disturbing emotions. When caught up in that, one will definitely go to the three lower realms. White thoughts, on the other hand, are devotion and pure appreciation towards enlightened beings, compassion for unenlightened beings, and a strong sense of honesty. Whatever comes out of this is automatically goodness or virtue, which is why they are called white undergods. Creating a virtuous frame of mind is thus not something impossible. What is the use of training in this? Recognize your essence in the moment of a strong devotion, which is an emotion so powerful that tears come to your eyes and the hairs on the body stand on end. As the thought Karmapa said, in the moment of love, the empty essence dawns nakedly. In that same instant, uncontrived self-existing awareness is totally devoid of any error or fault. Your empty essence has been laid totally bare and has dawned nakedly. The same can be experienced through intense compassion. Think of all sentient beings who, for so long, through such misery, roam about in samsara. They circle endlessly and they never seem to get enough. What a pity. Once again our eyes are filled with tears. The hairs on our body stand on end. We feel overwhelmed. When you recognize mind essence at such a moment, again there is no error. This is how white undercourse thoughts, virtuous thoughts, can be beneficial. In the moment of devotion towards enlightened beings or compassion towards unenlightened beings, your state of mind is not mixed with the three poisons. Isn't it true that devotion and compassion are unmixed with desire, anger, or stupidity? Neither are they mixed with dishonesty or deceit. Devotion is sincere, honest, and straightforward, and so is compassion. Through the path of honesty, one attains an honest state. This is why all Buddhas are called rishis, which means an uptight, totally straightforward person, whereas sentient beings practice a sly path and attain the state of trickster. Tricky here means kind of dishonest. This is why it is said that white, virtuous states of mind lead towards a pure path. Devotion and compassion are not the same as merely paying lip service to the Buddhas and sentient beings, saying, "Buddhas think of me," or "poor sentient beings," without putting any heart in that. To be truly authentic, the feeling of devotion and compassion should be overwhelming. To avoid being sidetracked from the view, there is no method superior to devotion and compassion. These two are universal panaceas, the basis for being able to journey along the white path and attain the 10 bhumis. Without these two, it is impossible to progress. It is said, "With a good heart, all paths and levels are good. With an evil heart, all paths and levels are evil." Everything depends on whether one's heart is good or evil. To reach enlightenment, we must pass through the paths and bhumis. That progress depends on pure attitude and good heart. Without this pure attitude, all paths lead in a perverted direction. This is why everything depends on a pure heart. First, recognize your own nature. Then keep devotion upwardly, compassion downwardly, and be diligent in between. Diligence means a sense of constancy. It's like the proper tension of a bowstring. If the bow itself is taut, the string doesn't change, becoming looser sometimes, tighter sometimes. Rather, it is constant. Diligent here means some sense of being undistracted, a gentle non-distraction. These three qualities of devotion, compassion, and diligence make you progress through the paths and bhumis. In addition, the application of purifying obscurations and gathering the accumulations, the nondro, is extremely important. It's not so necessary for a meditator to be involved in a lot of debate and analysis about whether something is or is not, proving and refuting and affirming and denying. You can get so caught up in this kind of debate that sweat appears on your forehead, your hands shake, and your lips quiver because you so badly want to prove your point and invalidate your opponents. But the whole purpose of the Dharma is to be free from anger and competitiveness. If one cultivates fury and rivalry through the Dharma, it's like Gampopa's famous saying, "If the Dharma is not practiced as it should, it can become a cause for rebirth in the lower realms." Student, recognizing my nature during a meditation session doesn't seem to be so difficult. It's simply a matter of remembering. However, it seems difficult to mix this with daily life. Is this what is meant by diligence? Rinpoche, diligence is like the example with the electric switch I used earlier. Unless you flip the switch, the light never comes on. When receiving pointing out instruction, one is told how to recognize mind essence. Without that, there is no recognition of how this essence is. It doesn't happen by itself, just as the light never switches on by itself. We have heard that we should not forget mind essence, that we shouldn't lose its continuity. But this is not like insistently looking and looking again, as if continuously pressing the switch to keep the light on. The moment of recognizing has a natural duration. It's like when you take a Tibetan bell, you ring it once, and the sound simply continues. It doesn't last forever, it wears off at a certain point. But that doesn't mean you have to sit and ring the bell continuously, ding, 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 ding. That's the analogy for sitting here thinking, I should be distracted, I should be undistracted, I should be undistracted, I should be undistracted. To do so would only create more thoughts. It is totally superfluous. In the moment of recognizing, you already see it. It is not that there is something extra there that needs to be recognized on top of seeing mind essence. It is, as I said, when you point towards space, you touch space from the first instant. You don't have to extend your fingers further in order to touch space. As beginners, we do forget mind essence. The way to remember again is by noticing that you have forgotten, by noticing distraction. Then you can remember to be undistracted. The teacher has explained the difference between distraction and non-distraction, right? Our job now is to notice when we are distracted. When noticing we are distracted, there is some slight sense of regret. A meditator doing this type of practice should actually experience some regret when mind essence is totally lost, when he or she becomes totally oblivious to the continuity of recognition. Yet we don't have to notch the regret. We simply recognize what is it that feels sorry for having lost the recognition. Honestly, unless we cultivate the sense of noticing when being distracted, there is only distraction, nothing else. This is what we call the black diffusion of samsara, underquotes, where there is only ignorance, never any knowing of what the essence actually is. For a samsaric person, this black diffusion is continuous. What is necessary now is to recognize mind essence and then not do anything to it. There is no need to try to improve the already cognizant empty essence. You don't have to adjust it or correct it in any way. It's like a tree growing on a mountain. Nobody needed to shape it that particular way. It just grew. Or the continuity of mind essence is like the water flowing along the riverbed. Nobody needs to pull the water down the river. Nobody has to push it. It continues by itself. There is one phrase which is always repeated in all Mahamudra and Dzogchen instruction manuals. Don't lose the continuity. Undergoes. That is how you are to train. The way to not lose the continuity is, in the moment of recognizing, not to do anything to it. If you attempt to alter it or improve upon the recognition, you lose it entirely. When simply living it as it is, in what is called the natural flow, undergoes, it does continue. It is not lost, just like the natural flow of a river. The moment we try to do something to it, it's immediately interrupted. The moment we forget, it is also lost. At that point, it is simply a matter of remembering or of noticing that one was carried away, and then recognizing mind essence again. It is said, uncontrived ordinary mind is the highway of the victorious ones. To contrive means to correct or improve, to hope or fear, to affirm or deny, to accept or reject. Not getting involved in any of that is what is meant by uncontrived. One may get the mistaken idea that this natural emptiness is not so effective or useful, that there is another emptiness, the real emptiness, which I somehow have to discover. If we begin to entertain that idea, it gets really difficult, because it would then mean that there should be another mind than the mind you already have. You know what is meant by being naked, having no clothes on, don't you? Well, thinking, I need the state of Rigpa, it should be such and such, this is what I need. It's just like putting more and more clothes on. Naked awareness is like a naked body. It's without trying to improve it or alter it, accept or reject, affirm or deny, without hope or fear. By being just like that, your awareness is already naked. Uncontrived ordinary mind is the highway of the victorious ones. Underquotes. This doesn't mean that this present mind should be thrown away and some new state should come down or materialize like being possessed by some another spirit. That simply won't happen. Self-existing wakefulness is the vital point. You can recognize the sun based on its light. You simply look to where the sunlight comes from. In the same way, if you recognize the nature of the thinker, you recognize Rigpa. That's why it is said one should look, recognize. You have to recognize because, as the Tantras say, the great wisdom dwells in the body. Once the body and mind separate at death, the great wisdom will no longer dwell in the body. Right now, in this city of an illusory body, in this city of the five aggregates, there is something very precious. It has not yet begun to flounder around in the BARDO because it is still in this body, which ties it down in a way. This is quite nice. Being in a physical body is like a wild horse tied down to a stake. It can move around in a circle, but it can never run away. While this unruly mind is in a physical body, it cannot suddenly take leave. So in this sense, the physical body is very useful. Once we die, though, it's like the wild horse's tether has broken. The horse will run wild over valleys and mountains, and we won't be able to catch it very easily. While body and mind are together, we need to train in recognizing this essence. At present, when we recognize Rigpa for a few seconds, it doesn't mean that we are liberated. But after that, when the body and mind separate and we are free of the body, it is said recognizing and being liberated are simultaneous. The yogic breaking loose from the encasement of the body is said to be like a Garuda bird hatching from the egg. But someone who doesn't train while alive in a body will not be able to recognize Rigpa when body and mind separate. For such a person with no experience of recognizing, perfecting the strength and attaining stability, there is surely no liberation. If you have trained sufficiently to reach the complete recognition of Rigpa and have some degree of stability, say for 20 or 30 consecutive minutes, you will be successful in the BARDO. There is no doubt about this, even though you haven't attained the complete enlightenment of having fully exhausted delusion throughout day and night. Otherwise, the BARDO is a place of awesome terror. You feel like you are being chased from behind by the 4 terrifying enemies, the 4 elements, while in front of you is the threefold immense abyss of attachment, aversion and dullness. Desire is like falling into a vast ocean. Aversion is like falling over the brink of a bottomless pit. Dullness is like being immersed in immense darkness. These are only one step ahead, while right behind you are the 4 terrifying enemies. The BARDO is not a fun place to be in. The element of earth is experienced as being like an avalanche just about to topple over you from behind. The water element feels like a flood of a huge ocean coming at you. Fire feels like an entire blazing mountain, while wind feels just like when you pump a bellows right at an ant who is powerlessly blown away. Right now the body is made of the 5 elements, but in the BARDO they arise as enemies, or at least it seems like that. But if you can manage to recognize mind essence, the 5 aggregates are naturally seen as the 5 wisdoms, while the 5 elements appear as the 5 female Buddhas. This is why the body is called the mandala of the victorious ones. If you don't recognize, they seem to be enemies, but if you recognize, they are helpers. We have to know one thing only. It is often said, if emptiness is all right, everything is all right. If emptiness is not all right, nothing is all right. What that means is if we recognize the state of emptiness, everything is fine. All of you, please train in recognizing this empty nature of your minds. You don't have to hope to become a great scholar or a great siddha. Through this training, the twofold knowledge of knowing the nature as it is and seeing all that exists will naturally unfold from within. You cannot avoid being enlightened. You cannot help but benefit sentient beings. If you recognize this fully, no one can hold you back from being enlightened, and no one can prevent you from benefiting beings. The twofold knowledge will overflow from within. Overflowing from within, underquotes, means spontaneously present, fully awakened. If he were to train in this, even a cow herder would be liberated, and we would all have to pay our respects and bow our heads to him. If he becomes a siddha, we would all fight with each other for the privilege of drinking his urine. Student: how do we recognize mind essence during the dream state? That is very difficult for me. Rinpoche: it's difficult because you haven't trained enough to become accustomed to it. A beginner experiences no obvious duration of recognizing mind essence, and therefore recognizing while falling asleep or in the state of deep sleep just doesn't seem possible. The possibility comes after having attained some degree of stability in the recognition of mind essence. Because of the strong habit of many lifetimes, we always get caught up in thoughts, regardless of whether it's day or night, whether we're awake or sleeping. It's not so easy to step out of that habit. Only when we grow really accustomed to recognition during our waking state is it possible to recognize during sleep as well. We are already caught up in the wheel of 12 links of dependent origination, the root of which is ignorance, basic unknowing. The period of deep sleep is a subsidiary aspect of ignorance. The real ignorance is the unknowing of our basic nature. As long as this ignorance is perpetuated, the 12 links continue. That is why it's not so easy to recognize during deep sleep. We have to work with the daytime first. If you can recognize mind essence during the sleeping state, you'll certainly be able to cross the BARDO. This doesn't require a continuous recognition of Rigpa during the sleep state. A scripture says, if you recognize the state of non-dual awareness 7 times during sleep, there is no doubt you will be liberated in the BARDO. The ordinary state in which we have not recognized the state of Rigpa is called delusion. The dream state is called double delusion. The big sleep of ignorance has continued since beginningless lifetimes until now. Nighttime is double delusion, one delusion on top of another. Isn't it true that the duration of non-dual awareness in actuality is very short and slips away almost immediately? During the rest of the time, which is the predominant amount of time during our waking state, we are caught up in one deluded thought after the other, while all of them unaware of their own nature. This is the black diffusion of the deluded mind, which goes on throughout day and night. After you train assiduously during the daytime in repeatedly recognizing the state of non-dual awareness, it becomes possible to recognize during nighttime. The measure of guaranteed success in the BARDO is to recognize 7 times during the dream state. Here is one method of how to begin. Visualize a 4-petal red lotus flower in your heart center. Imagine that your mind is in the form of the syllable Ah in the center of this lotus flower. The syllable Ah is brilliant and radiates light. While visualizing this, at the same time also recognize what visualizes. Recognize that which your own guru pointed out as being the state of Rigpa and simply leave it as it is, naturally, while allowing the visualization to continue. In that state, gently fall asleep. This is not something that happens overnight. We need to train in this every evening when falling asleep. Maintain the visualization while falling asleep and while in the state of naturalness of Rigpa as well. In this context, the light of the letter A is called manifest luminosity and the Rigpa that is recognized is called the empty luminosity. In this way, the appearance and emptiness are a unity. That is the luminosity of Rigpa. The light is brilliant, radiant white, just like when you switch on the electric light. The traditional image for this is a bottle lamp inside a vase. Because there was no electricity in Tibet, that is the image for the manifest luminosity. The white light is manifest luminosity, whereas the empty luminosity is the primordial purity of empty mind essence. Recognize that the object that is being held in mind to a certain extent is the radiant white symbol Ah. While the awareness of it remains without any fixation, simply fall asleep in that state. The posture used in going to sleep is called the posture of sleeping lion on a quotes. It's important to lie on the right side because the channels through which disturbing emotions move are mainly on the right side. To suppress that flow of disturbing emotions, one lies on the right side. When pressing the channel through which the current of disturbing emotions flow, there will be less conceptual thought. It's like when you exhale the still breath, don't you start by exhaling through the right nostril? The physical body is said to be a city, the city of the illusory body. This body is a big city. There are so many channels, so many winds moving through them, thousands and thousands of channels, and 21,600 movements of pranas and winds during a single day and night. There are 84,000 different types of mental states or disturbing emotions. This enormous scale of movement is like that of a big city, isn't it? How many microbes are there within this one body? It is impossible to count. Each of these is sentient, so it really is like a big city. The illusory city of the physical body is like Kathmandu. When mainly practicing the recognition of mind essence, the currents called the karmic winds, which means conceptual thinking, are naturally transformed into the wisdom wind. Impure channels are naturally transformed into the wisdom channel, and dualistic mind is naturally transformed into original wakefulness. Usually this is described as the winds dissolving into the central channel. The immense traffic of wind through the different channels all dissolves into the central channel. In response to a student's explanation of an experience, Rinpoche says, I am going to tease you a little. Mind essence is Buddha Samantabhadra, right? Buddha Samantabhadra has no front and no back. From whichever direction you see him, he is always excellent. When you look from the south, you see his face. You look from the west and you also see his face. You may be in any of the 4 cardinal or 4 intermediate directions, or perhaps more than once at the same time, and you can still see his face in front of you. No matter which direction you are in, Samantabhadra has no front and no back. From whichever direction you look, he is always excellent. That is a play on the word Samantabhadra, which means the ever excellent. This analogy is actually referring to Rigpa. Rigpa doesn't have a direction, does it? It is all-pervasive, a wide-open, expansive state. All-pervasive openness is the characteristic of Rigpa. Confined narrowness is the characteristic of dualistic mind. This experience you talked about is the sign of the all-pervasive openness. It is a sign of Rigpa, which is not confined, narrowed or limited in any direction whatsoever. Whatever is empty is not a concrete substance. Whatever is empty is not confined into any direction. It has no east, west, south or north. Rigpa is unlimited, unconfined. It has no finite dimension or specific size. Neither does it have a fixed direction. There isn't an east or west of Rigpa. Rigpa is like space. Whichever direction you journey in, you can't ever reach the end of space. Space has no top or bottom. You can dig an enormous hole in the earth, and whatever you drop in it will always reach the bottom, won't it? Space is not like this. You can travel down through space for 1,000,000 years and still never reach the bottom. This is towards the east. Rinpoche touches the eastern wall with his hand. I've reached the limit right there. But you can travel in this direction through space for 1,000,000,000 eons, and you will never reach the limit toward the east, or toward the south, or west, or the north. There are no limits in the 4 cardinal directions, so of course there are no limits in the 4 intermediate directions either. There is no top or bottom, so if there is no limit or end anywhere, how can space have a center? Try to imagine space. Wherever there is space, there are sentient beings. Wherever there are sentient beings, there are disturbing emotions and karma. Wherever there are disturbing emotions and the creation of karma, there is Buddha nature. This is an example for being unconfined and unlimited. Try and imagine how space is. The characteristic of Rangjang Yeshe, self-existing wakefulness, is unconfined and wide open. That is the characteristic of Rigpa. Confined narrowness is the characteristic of dualistic mind. Isn't there a huge difference between the two? This unconfined openness is not an object held in mind. It is not something we can conceive of. It lies beyond the domain of thought. You hear about the celestial mansion that the Sambhogagaya deities reside in. The literal term is immeasurable palace, and of course, something so vast it's beyond measure. That the deity's palace is measureless or immeasurable means there is no size, no dimension to it. It is beyond dimension. You never heard about the palace of fixed measure. The word is never used. Rather, it lies beyond dimensions. Buddha mind or Rigpa is likewise beyond limit and category. You cannot find a set parameter for how big or how vast Rigpa is, and it has no category, meaning it isn't in one place and not another. Like space, it is beyond that. Rigpa is also free of meditator and meditation object. Meditation object means something that we focus on, and meditator that which focuses. It is totally devoid of subject and object. Self-existing wakefulness is free of reference point and the fixation on attributes. This state is also called transcendent knowledge, prajna paramita. It means knowledge that has passed to the other side of dualistic concepts. The usual understanding is always on this side. It hasn't gone beyond yet. Transcendent means transcending both thinker and what is thought of. This is how the nature of mind actually is. This nature of self-existing wakefulness is something from which we have never been apart for even one instant. Recognize it, train in the strengths of that recognition, and attain stability, and you are a Buddha. Your mind and self-existing wakefulness have never ever been apart. They are inseparable. Sentient beings just do not know how to look. Though from time to time they see that there is no thing, they don't realize that this is their self-existing wakefulness. To recognize your own nature, your natural phase, which is self-existing wakefulness, you need to see that it is an unconfined empty cognizance. If Buddha nature was only empty, it would be impossible for it to recognize itself, just as space cannot see itself. We are empty cognizance, and this cognizance is what we can recognize. You can recognize who you are, right? If you look some other place, how will you ever know who you are? It's like a crazy man, an idiot, losing himself in the bazaar in Kathmandu. He runs around in the bazaar trying to find himself until someone points at him and says, "You are right here. You are you." Noticing himself, he finally says, "Oh yeah." That is the same job the master takes on when pointing out a disciple's mind essence. He says your mind is empty cognizance. Recognize yourself and you will see it. What does it look like? It is saying that there is no thing to see. It is called empty. The knowing of that is cognizance. These are not two separate things. They are indivisible. Do you agree that it isn't a thing to be seen? This is the fact of looking and saying that mind is no thing to be seen. Saying that is called the great sight. If we talk about this 100 times, 1,000 times, mind essence is exactly the same. Empty cognizance of one taste, suffused with knowing, is your unmistaken nature, the uncontrived original state. When not altering what is, allow it to be as it is, and the awakened state is right now, spontaneously present. Understand those words? They are Padmasambhava's words from the Lamrim Yeshen Ningpo, and they show the true meaning. The sight of the unmistaken nature is extremely rare. Sentient beings don't see, and even if they happen to see, they don't believe. Yet this is the most eminent sight of all, and it's not something you need to look for elsewhere. If you know how to recognize your mind and you do it, isn't it vividly seen in the same moment without you needing to imagine it? Is there anything superior to this, or anything easier, anything simpler? What is wrong is that it is too easy. So easy that it's hard to trust. Sentient beings have a hard time believing it. If mind essence were something that would stare back at you and wave when you recognized, if when you said, "Oh, there it is," it would reply, "Yes, my son, you got it," then you would believe, wouldn't you? The recognition of mind essence is itself great peace. In that moment, there is no subject and object. What is the need for anything to find on top of that? What we really need to discover is the absence of some concrete thing. No matter how much we search and seek and strive, we never realize mind essence as a concrete thing. It has not even as much as a single atom of concreteness. This essence, when fully realized, is often described as the all-pervading Lord of Samsara and Nirvana, undercourse, the Lord of all that appears and exists. This Lord, undercourse, is simply empty cognizance, which is totally inconcrete. The more stable you become in this essence, the more thoughts dissolve. Then it is possible to be like the Mahasiddhas of the past and fly through the sky like a bird, move through water like a fish, and pass through solid matter. That is the ultimate proof of the unreality of appearances. It is not that yogis are very strong and physically powerful beings who can force their way through real concrete things. Their actions are merely revealing the fact that all appearances are unreal. Material appearances are in fact identical with the appearances in your dreams.